I'm ready to be compassionate. Hi, Sam. I'm right.
The Skull Merchant, everyone's favorite fashion model. When it comes to all the killers that exist within Dead by Daylight, I don't think there's any other killer who has as much history, nor as much infamy, as her. She released in an immensely weak and problematic state, resulting in her pushing the 3-gen meta that was prevalent beforehand into complete overdrive, with her stalling matches for 1 hour till the servers crashed. After many months of causing chaos and crashing servers, Behavior would quickly rework Skull Merchant into her 2.0 iteration, and for the most part, it did a fantastic job at resolving many of her problems. Her potential 3-gen was severely hindered, her gameplay was pushed towards an aggressive trap and stealth strategy, and she started to grow towards a more healthy design while being mediocre in balance. Unfortunately, the community would continue to find this version of Skull Merchant extremely dull to face. This is because, although the rework resolved her 3-gen potential, it pushed towards an aggressive anti-loop strategy, and blurred her core concept for her fans. Behavior could have done any number of changes to resolve these raising concerns, but instead they left her to continue festering that hatred for over a year. It is because of that decision, along with player pettiness, that players continued to disconnect or give up matches, boosting her kill rate to 70%, and as such, Behavior had to whip out the shotgun, because she was clearly just that broken. All jokes aside, Skull Merchant would be left to rot, with Behavior covering the decomposing corpse with a cosmetic or two, and over time her kit would be riddled with bugs. During this period, Behavior also posted several rework concepts for Skull Merchant, several meaning 2, and both of which did not really receive that much positive light from either her player base or the community as a whole. To be blatantly honest, I was expecting Behavior to leave her like this for about 2 more years or so, until the rework would finally arrive, but instead, Behavior decided to surprise us all with several light buffs. The logic from Behavior is that after the year of her being non-existent for players to calm down, they want to see if the current version of Skull Merchant can work, as the rework is more technically demanding, and they want to see if it is necessary or not first. Interesting logic there, Behavior. Where was this logic in the months leading up to her getting curb stomped? Okay, I'm now busy degrading into negative Nancy territory, and let's be honest here, we already have enough of that in normal Dead by Daylight matches and the hellscape that is Dead by Daylight Twitter, so let's go to something a little more positive. Compared to her history, the perks that Skull Merchant provided are a lot easier to read, and honestly more tame in nature. Unlike other perks that I've covered in Why No One Uses, with the exception of 1 or 2 of them, Skull Merchant's perks did actually see a good chunk of play as tech choices and player builds. Her perks never tore apart the fragile meta of Dead by Daylight, but they did provide some interesting moments that I believe are important to cover. Additionally, their designs are honestly really unique, and unfortunately, it's something most ignore when talking about Tools of Torment, mostly because, when it is brought up, there are the many people who go, "Today I will remind them." In any case, we are talking about Skull Merchant's perks, and if you have already watched my previous videos in this series, then you already know the whole song and dance of what I do here. So let's get started.
Like, where does she keep getting these weapons? That outfit has no pockets!
To start our laundry list off, let's cover Game Afoot first, which interestingly was the only perk that many consider to have the potential to become a meta choice on the PTB. Game Afoot has the following effect. Upon landing a basic attack on the survivor with the most chase time, they become the new obsession. Additionally, you gain a 7% haste boost for 10 seconds upon kicking a pallet, breakable wall, or generator while in chase with the obsession. To explain why players believed Game Afoot had the potential to become a meta perk, we have to go over a bit of history, as Game Afoot functions slightly differently on its PTB state compared to its live release. The way that Game Afoot read the survivor with the most chase time on the PTB could be best described as a Schrodinger's obsession, as although they weren't considered an obsession with the entity clause, they were still very much considered an obsession by the game. This could be more evidently seen with Rancor, which has the ability to inflict the obsession with Exposed once all generators are completed, and grants you the ability to mori them. As the game was reading both the original obsession and the player with the most chase as obsession, you could pop Rancor's effects on either of them with the most chase time survivor not being notified of Rancor's Exposed, and they would end up getting a nasty surprise. Wraith and Spirit players in particular were drooling at the potential of a Game Afoot Rancor meta to manifest, as they could easily weaponize this strategy while staying AFK, but Behavior would end up patching it on the live release. Now, Game Afoot does not read the most chase time survivor as the Obsession until after a basic attack lands, which as a result made the Rancor strategy take a major hit. I have to be honest, I never expected Behavior to resolve that playstyle as fast as they did, but hey, I suppose Behavior did not want their ever-growing list of problems to include that gameplay strategy. In any case, after the change, most players dropped discussions on Game Afoot and it was left to fester. In all honesty, a simple Schrodinger's obsession bug is not the sole reason on why players drop the idea of running Game Afoot, as there are many other problems with its core design that makes it rather clunky to execute. The best way to explain its faults is to first divide the perk into two parts, the first being its obsession swapping element, the second being its effect on chasing the obsession. Going over the obsession swapping gimmick, it is an element that is rather cute in nature, but in reality it perfectly fits for what the perk is trying to go for. This is because Game Afoot is designed within the Obsession subclass of perks, where the core focus is to use the Obsession like a chess piece, granting you unique benefits by playing with the Obsession through various ways. This can be seen with many of the perks within the subclass, such as with Save the Best for Last, Dark Devotion, Furtive Chase, you get the idea. In addition to using the Obsession like a chess piece, the Obsession subclass also plays around with the gimmick of Obsession swapping. This is done for a variety of reasons, such as promoting healthy play and keeping the perks alive for the trial, but another reason is to push the Obsession effects onto other targets too. As I said before, Rancor loved Game Afoot for its ability to swap Obsessions, and place a one-shot on multiple targets, but this logic can also be seen on many of the other Obsession-focused perks. As a result, the Obsession swapping to the survivor with the most chase time is a gimmick that feels right at home with the Obsession subclass, but there is a big difference between Game Afoot and the other Obsession swapping perks, and that is the surprising complexity to how Game Afoot functions. One of the key elements that makes the Obsession swapping perk so enjoyable to run is its ease of swapping the Obsession, because the requirements tend to be very easy. Getting stunned is not a difficult task, so Nemesis can activate fairly consistently. Fetching hooks and unhooks is also a common event too, which makes perks like Furtive Chase and Friends Till the End fan favorites. Unfortunately, Game Afoot is not like them. This is because unlike the other Obsession swapping perks, Game Afoot's Obsession swapping element is tied to a chase timer, which is a number that is ever changing and can easily be manipulated. To better explain why this is difficult to utilize, let me use an example. Let's say that you chase Survivor A for around 20 seconds and fetch the down. This now means that if you want to apply the Obsession title onto Survivor B, you will need to chase them for at least 21 seconds and land a basic attack to swap the Obsession title. As many of you know, fetching a consistent chase like this is not always possible, and you may end up chasing Survivor B for 2 minutes. This now means that if you chase Survivors C or D, you now need to spend over 2 minutes to change the Obsession onto these targets. You may also notice that I'm using letters rather than survivor names, and that is because survivors can each play the same character and wear the same cosmetics, making it harder to tell the chase time on targets. There is also no visual tell from Game Afoot on who is the survivor with the most chase time, nor is there any cue on what the chase time is on survivors. All of that responsibility is instead in your hands, and that is something most players don't want to deal with. I have talked about how the feel of a perk can easily influence players and whether they wish to use it or not several times and why no one uses before, and Game Afoot is sadly the same as the rest of them. Swapping the Obsession through chase time sounds cute in concept, but as I have shown with my example, it can quickly spiral out of control if you go for too long of a chase or focus too much on one target. Keeping to that point, many of you may already be bringing up the fact that there are other ways to swap the Obsession, such as with the examples I brought up before. To that I say that you are correct, as Dead by Daylight prides itself on the many different combinations the perks can bring for build diversity, and Game Afoot is one of the most interesting in that regard. Typically, perks are geared around supporting one group of perks. Others are designed to be flexible, but there are rare moments where perks support a hybrid design. A great example of this is with Thrilling Tremors. a perk that has the effect to block generators not being worked on when you pick a survivor up for 16 seconds. Compared to other gen blocking perks in the game, the duration is low, but that is because Thrilling Tremors is placing its value into the other point of value it gives, that being unique information. Unlike its counterpart of Aura Reading, Thrilling Tremors provides you information on what generators are being worked on and what isn't, and as a result you now know where to go, while denying particular counter perks for survivors like Distortion. Game Afoot is attempting to be a hybrid of the Obsession subclass and the Chase subclass, two groups of perks that enjoy being paired together to boost each other. As a result, it makes sense for behavior to make a perk that bridges the gap between the two and have a perk that makes them combine even better. That being said, there is a very big weakness when it comes to hybrid design perks, and that is the value they provide must be exceptional if you want to consider running it. Looking at Thrilling Tremors again, the value it provides allows you to reduce information perks to bring, allowing you other options, and due to how flexible information is, you can theoretically run it in almost any build. That being said, its information is not as accurate as Aura Reading perks, and its reduced timer for blocking gens, along with what generators are blocked, makes its inclusion for some builds more complicated. Game Afoot is similar to this, and that is because its effects, although good, are just beaten out by its competition. The Obsession subclass have builds that are very strict on what can be run, and so when players attempt to squeeze Game Afoot into these builds, players will have to make painful choices on what core pieces to remove to fit it in. In the case of the Chase subclass, Game Afoot needs access to the Obsession swapping perks to make it more consistent, and as a result it reduces options for Chase-focused builds and can weaken their strategies. This is not to say that Game Afoot does not have particular builds it can fully be utilized in, as we do have players like Oddstarva who highlight the Game Afoot Bubba build, but it is a very difficult perk to make builds with, which is a death sentence for hybrid perks. Speaking about Oddstarva's Bubba build, this is a great jumping point into the third problem of Game Afoot, and that is its specific nature when it comes to who can utilize it. There is a small line of text within the perk, one tiny detail that makes the perk fall apart for some killers, and that is the fact that Game Afoot only applies Obsession to the highest chase time survivor through a basic attack. This means that some killers are just locked out of the Obsession swapping effects for Game Afoot, as some killers are designed to use their M2 much more heavily compared to the M1. Some examples of this are Nurse, Huntress, Twins, or Krasu, but there does exist killers who can utilize Game Afoot, even if they are more geared around their M2s to fetch damage. Bubba, Demogorgon, and Nemesis are great examples of this, as although they have to alter towards a more M1 focused playstyle, their powers can break the palette, and as such, they can fetch the value of Game Afoot. That is, if Game Afoot worked properly. Yeah, Game Afoot is currently bugged, and as a result the only way to fetch the haste effect is from manually kicking pallets like a caveman, aka Trapper style. This means that Nemo, Demo, and Mr. Bubbles over there, killers who would love the perk because of their pallet breaking effects, do not have access to the perk, and as such it makes the roster who can use it even tighter. I would not normally complain about a bug when it comes to perks, but this one has been in the game for almost a year now, and as a result it may as well be a feature, like Skull Merchant as a whole. Let's just get to the review. Overall, Game Afoot has several pain points that makes it not see all that much play. Its Obsession swapping effects can easily be misused or manipulated, making it become harder to utilize as the game goes on. It's beaten out by other options, both in the Obsession and Chase subclasses of perks, and because of its design, along with the bug, it makes it very strict on who can run it. If behavior ever wanted to go with changing Game Afoot, realistically number tweaks are going to do very little here. The issue with Game Afoot is not its balance, instead it is its consistency, as Game Afoot is just very clunky to execute. Players are not going to utilize a perk that is bugged or feels terrible to run, unless it is bugged to win you the game, and as a result, the first change I would recommend is targeting this issue. I believe that one of the best changes behavior could do to Game Afoot would be to give the killer some way of knowing who the survivor with the most chase time is. This could be with a unique visual on the Survivor HUD, or a visual cue on the Survivor, like how Skull Merchant had an eye pop up over survivors during the PTB when looking at her phone. You could even have Maurice show up and have him whisper in your ear who the player is. The imagination is limitless. The point I am raising here is that by providing the killer with some clue, it helps boost up the consistency of Game Afoot, and it lets them know when the most chase time title swaps to a new player, but keeps the ability for players to sit in the big brain chair when they fully utilize the perk. As for the second idea for changes, I could be boring and simply say fix the stupid perk behavior, but this is just a given, and not realistically a change. No, you're all here to listen to spicy takes on balance changes, so here's one for you, and that is to give Game Afoot the ability to apply Obsession through any form of damage, special attacks included. I had a worry for a long time about a change like this, especially with the Rancor combo, but realistically I think this would be a really goofy idea. Not only would it open the perk up to other killers, but it would also just make the perk feel smoother to utilize, and that is the name of the game that Game Afoot needs. Overall, Game Afoot is a perfect perk to start with, because it shows everything off about Tools of Torment. Cool concepts that Behavior created, but their execution was so foul it makes spoiled milk look like a delicacy. I do think Game Afoot's overall concept is one that can easily become a fan favorite with the least amount of changes though. The issues stem from its clunky design, and if Behavior ever do consider streamlining the perk, I can easily see killer players picking the perk up and calling themselves OG Game Afoot fans, even if they did not endure the suffering we have.
I got a job for you two. I printed up a bunch of fake safety inspection certificates. Go slap one on anything that looks like a lawsuit.
Uncle Stan, is that legal?
When there's no cops around, anything's legal.
Moving on to the second perk within Skull Merchant's Toy Box of Terror, we have Leverage, which many of you may remember, as this one was fairly relevant within the meta play of Dead by Daylight. The effect of Leverage is quite simple. After a survivor is unhooked, the unhooking survivor is applied with a 30% healing penalty for 60 seconds. Interestingly, this was not the perk's effect on release, and instead it was far more interesting with its design. I'm going to talk about its history here, mostly because it will lead into one of the core problems with the perk, but also because I enjoy talking about perk history, as all of you may have gathered from my years making videos. The original effect of Leverage was that after hooking a survivor, you would gain a token up to a maximum of 10. And after a survivor was unhooked, all survivor healing speeds would be reduced by 5% per token for 30 seconds. Long story short, the perk did not see any play, mostly because, although the stacking healing penalty was cute, it realistically only dealt damage when two survivors were already dead. As such, Behavior went to rework the perk, placing its maximum value immediately after a player was unhooked, but the other big difference was to who was affected by Leverage. The original effect of Leverage affected all survivors once the player was unhooked, meaning that the perk could influence all healing, even medkits or a group heals elsewhere after the unhook. This was unfortunately lost in translation with the Leverage rework, as Behavior limited the effects of the healing debuff to only the unhooking survivor. This is the first problem with Leverage, as there are a number of ways that Leverage can fall apart from survivor actions. The first is, of course, if another survivor were to run and perform the heal, Leverage won't affect them, as they are not the unhooking survivor. Additionally, both survivors could perform a group heal and the healing penalty would help, but not as well compared to alone. Lastly, the unhooking survivor could just have healing perks that go over the anti-healing percentage, making its effects null and void. That particular problem is actually the second issue with Leverage, and you all may know this quite well, considering Leverage became a popular tech choice back before patch 9.2.0. After its rework, Leverage's numbers were a 50% healing reduction for 30 seconds on the unhooking survivor, and as a result it became a popular combo choice with... Scourge Hook Weeping Wounds. I talked a little bit about it in my perk type archive video, but the gist of it is that perks like Will Make It and Resurgence have been very powerful tools for resetting under hook. As a result, killer players look towards the combo of Leverage and the atrociously named Weeping Wounds as a form of counterbalance. That perk in particular would remove some progress from Resurgence if the player had it, and Leverage would combine with the terribly named perk to reduce the healing speed of Will Make It, or other healing options under the hook. Additionally, Gift of Pain would punish the players for healing with a penalty to healing and repair speeds until injured once again, as a form of punishment for fetching the heal so fast. Unfortunately, for some people, this is the second problem with Leverage, and that is the fact that Behavior nerfed the perk in patch 9.2.0. Although the longer timer from the change is indeed nice, the reduction to healing is what made players drop the perk. Now, it is important to note that Behavior were not just nerfing the perk because they were sniffing something funny. Instead, there was an actual reason for it. The Leverage and Gift of Pain combo was very abusive to face for people who weren't running healing choices, and as a result, killer players would run back to the hook and tunnel the survivors out while bleeding the healing bar dry. This video from Otstarva is a great example of showing off this disruptive nature of the build, and as you can see, it did not look all that fun from the survivor's perspective. As a result, Behavior nerfed the perk with good intentions in mind. Unfortunately, the execution is where things get iffy. As Behavior nerfed the strength of Leverage's anti-heal, they sadly did not look at why the combo was being run in the first place, and that was because of the healing perks of Resurgence or Will Make It. Unlike a particular British Skull Merchant enjoyer, I am not going to be yelling that Do No Harm broke the game, but I will state that he made a very good point when it comes to healing over the years. As Behavior released more healing perks and buffed the numbers of existing healing options, Behavior 2 have nerfed down anti-healing options, and any new ones have been very flaky with design and balance. As a result, it has led into players being capable of refreshing off hooks within nanoseconds, and killer players have been left with very little options for counterplay. I will say that Behavior have yet to make the perks reach the unholy nightmare that was the Circle of Healing meta years long ago, but we are getting very close to it. Speaking about anti-healing in general, this is the third problem with Leverage, and it's a rather funny one. That being, there are just better alternatives. Now you may be wondering why I say this is a funny problem, as I mentioned the better alternatives issue like 200 times each video, and that has to do with what perks exist that actually disrupt healing. To quickly review the list, we have Sloppy Butcher, Weeping Wounds, Leverage, Corvophobia, No Quarter, and Force Penance. All other forms of anti-heal are placed within the killer's add-ons, and their effectiveness varies depending on how the killer power places it on survivors. There are also other perks that focus on making survivors heal or place effects on them after healing, but we are not looking at them. Instead, we are looking at anti-heal specifically through stat manipulation. Looking over this list, we can already tell they feel vastly stronger compared to Leverage. Sloppy Butcher is a great tool at disrupting healing from landing a basic attack. Corlophobia and No Quarter have their niche moments, but they can fetch some very good value when they work. And Weeping Wounds... yeah, I've already talked about it. The interesting one here is Force Penance, as it places broken on survivors who go for body blocks, but it works as anti-healing as it places a timer before players can go for a heal, which is very nice on some killers. In comparison, Leverage just feels weak. The anti-healing number is low, the activation only affects one person compared to other players, and although it can stack, you are better off just using other choices. You may have noticed that I was moving quickly through the issues on Leverage, and that is because it is a simple perk with very simple problems. I feel like I've said this exact phrase before, but I don't remember where. Probably another one of my Why No One Uses videos. Going over Leverage's problems though, it only influences the unhooking survivor, which can be disrupted in many different ways. Its value can be outperformed by survivors' healing perks, and the very few alternatives that exist are just better to utilize. Compared to its sister perk of Game Afoot, Leverage's biggest issue is its balance. I understand where Behavior came from when it came to reducing the unfair nature of the perk, but the value they ended up with is just not strong enough to warrant players to utilize it. As a result, I came up with two changes that help to bring power back to the perk, with the first change being simple. The first buff concept Behavior can utilize would be to apply Leverage's effects onto every player after the unhook is performed, similar to how it functioned back in its first state. I fully understand why behavior made it specific to one player when they boosted the number to its highest value, but after its numbers were cut down, it makes the logic for this perk influencing one player pointless. By making leverage affect all survivors with a healing debuff, it helps to reduce problem number 1, as now you cannot dump the unhooking survivor onto a different player as they too are influenced. Additionally, it makes leverage become an interesting choice to help with problem number 3, which I believe would be great to bring leverage back on the table and away from the dustbin where behavior put it. Perhaps wash it first though, behavior. We do have children here. Moving on to the second buff concept for leverage, many of you will be quite excited, as I wish to provide a potential rework for the perk, which I will admit has been quite a while since I last gave a rework concept. This rework stems from the initial identity of leverage, as I did think it had a really cool idea behind it, but it really needed some help to make it more sound when it came to strength. The rework for leverage goes as follows. After hooking a unique survivor, you gain a token up to a maximum of 4. After a survivor is unhooked, all survivor healing speeds are reduced by 10% per token for 30 seconds. Once you have reached 4 tokens, Leverage's healing debuff is increased by 20% and lasts 15 seconds longer. All tokens are lost if you hook a survivor you have just hooked, or if a survivor dies. The idea here is to provide the old Leverage's healing debuff a little sooner, but also giving you some extra kick in values when fully stacked. To prevent the perk from going overboard with tunnel play, as this was why behavior nerfed it before, I included a kill switch into the perk to reset itself once the killer goes for that tactic. The ability to tunnel is still in the perk unfortunately, but compared to other anti-heal options, it is a much fairer system to exist. Leverage is sadly a perk that was hit because of circumstance. Its value existed because of a disruptive form of play that is more utilized within higher MMRs, but behavior looked towards nerfing the perk due to how disruptive it could be when used for malicious gameplay. I can understand behavior from that perspective, but it would have really helped if behavior also nerfed the perks that caused this combo to spawn in the first place. I understand behavior wanting to keep altruistic healing strong, as promoting team play is a good choice, but I do think Resurgence should be looked at, as it has only caused trouble ever since its buff. Regardless, I do think leverage should be looked at again, as I believe having options for anti-heal is necessary for players, and we should not just have one as the defining option.
Batman would never hit a defenseless woman.
Funny. I don't have that problem.
Moving on to the third and final perk for Skull Merchant, we are going to be talking about one of, if not, my most favorite perk within the game. THWACK not only is a perk with an absolutely cool and hilarious name, but it also has a very neat effect. THWACK starts the trial with 3 tokens, with 3 being its maximum. Upon breaking a pallet or breakable wall, THWACK consumes a token and causes all survivors within 36 meters to scream and reveal their auras for 6 seconds. You gain a token upon hooking a survivor. Of all 3 of Skull Merchant's perks, THWACK is the one that received the least amount of attention from players, and the same thing could be said about its balance over time. Behavior first released the perk with a timer effect from hooking a survivor, which was very short-lived as Behavior removed it from its PTB state. Then the perk would be reworked on patch 8.3.0, introducing its token system, but nerfing its range, and the perk got bugged with not causing players to scream. But it would be resolved in patch 9.0.0, turning it into the perk we all know and love today. Additionally, this is the one Skull Merchant perk that actually has more than double the play rates of both of her other perks, showing that it does at least see some use within trials. That being said, it's like comparing a trash bag to the prestige version of a trash bag. It's prettier, but it's still not all that great. And with that, I've insulted 2 games in 1! Oh, I am on fire today, huh? All jokes aside, I suppose the important question we all should ask now is why THWACK does not see all that much play, and I believe the best place to start explaining is by talking about its associated subclass. THWACK is an aura reading perk. As many of you may suspect, it's a subclass designed to provide you information through aura reading. Shocking information to hear, I know, but the reason I am bringing this up is because the first problem for THWACK has to do with its subclass. As many of you already know, aura reading within Dead by Daylight is a massive subclass of perks, and as a result it has players fighting over which aura reading perks they want to run. As a result, THWACK's first issue is the fact that it has to battle with many different alternatives for what it's trying to do, and compared to its sister perks like Game Afoot or Leverage, which have better alternatives, THWACK is actually good. The aura reading duration is a good value, the activation is easy, and it feels enjoyable to run. There is a lot to like here. The problem is not that there are better alternatives, the issue is that there are too many alternatives. As a result, players are going to gravitate towards aura reading perks that fit their particular playstyles, or instead look towards specific aura reading perks that work well with their characters. Long story short, the only way that THWACK will beat out its competition is if it also gives you a back massage and a free cosmetic on Sable, the only survivor to ever exist now. Moving on to its second problem, and this one is actually shared with its sister perk of Game Afoot. Remember how I mentioned that Game Afoot is a perk that is very particular about who can run it? Well, THWACK is similar to it, but not as much of an extreme as Game Afoot. You may notice killers like Nemesis or even Wraith running THWACK every once in a while, and that has to do with the fact that these are killers who can utilize THWACK to its fullest. Nemesis in particular can break pallets quickly with his whip at tier 2, and as a result he can fetch quick information on players and continue moving to fetch full infection. Wraith 2 is interesting with how he uses it, as THWACK does not utilize your terror radius for its range. Instead, it can be a useful information tool while confusing survivors on your location due to the screen. Then there is of course Pyramid Head, who Altstarva once again released a recent video showing off how Pyramid Head puts in some good work with THWACK, and after his add-on pass with the Obsidian Goblet, it is even better. Additionally, THWACK has an interesting element when it comes to flashlight blinds, as the scream ends up making survivors get stunned in the scream animation, causing them to miss the blind if they mistime it. This can be really nice with ranged killers who can make use of the survivor messing up. But this is where all the positives end for this portion of THWACK. Realistically, not every killer will be capable of utilizing THWACK to its fullest. Instead, most players will be able to run away while you are locked in the pallet break animation, causing you to lose value depending on what killer you are playing. As a result, although the value THWACK can provide you is really nice, it all depends on who you play, as THWACK treats one group of killers much nicer than the others. Moving on to the third and final problem with THWACK, this one is quite interesting. As many of you know, THWACK utilizes a token system. Although token-based perks tend to be some of the healthiest within the game, with some exceptions, they also tend to have their fair share of issues. THWACK in particular is one that can easily shred through its resources, depending on how its chase is played out. As I already explained with problem number 2, THWACK tends to be rather killer specific, and the killers who run THWACK have abilities to shred through pallets at a very fast pace. Additionally, THWACK does not have a cooldown to it. Instead, it will always pop the moment when you break a pallet or breakable wall, which helps make the perk feel nicer to run, but also leads into its third issue. THWACK as a perk is one that can easily shred through its token system if you aren't careful, and as you only fetch one token per hook, you can easily lose out on value you may have wanted at some other point. This is another reason behind why players run other aura rating perks in the game. But to better explain myself, let's compare THWACK to a perk with a similar design space, that being Nowhere to Hide. Nowhere to Hide has the effect to reveal survivor auras within 24 meters of you for 5 seconds after damaging a generator, and as many of you may notice, it is very popular. This has to do with a variety of other reasons, such as its aura range being tied to the killer rather than the generator, but also because of how accessible the perk is to run. Nowhere to Hide just needs you to kick a generator and you will fetch aura reading. Simple, elegant, but most importantly, very strong. THWACK instead needs you to have a token, dropped pallets or available breakable walls, survivors within the range of that pallet, and also gives the survivors information of what you are running. Compared to aura reading perks like Nowhere to Hide, THWACK has a few more restrictions and countermeasures to make it feel more balanced to face, but that balance ends up backfiring in THWACK's face. It's very weird to say, but I believe THWACK's balance is a little too balanced, especially compared to other perks within the game. Okay, let's clean up shop before the final thoughts of the video and review THWACK's issues one last time before we mention changes. THWACK has to fight for the attention of players due to the sheer size of the aura reading subclass, even if its balance is stable. It's a perk that is rather specific in who can fully utilize it, and compared to other aura reads within the game, it requires its players to practice restraint or else it fizzles out. I have to be honest, when it comes to talking about changes for THWACK, this is a very tricky situation. Compared to Skull Merchant's other misfits of perks, THWACK has always been considered the least problematic of the bunch, and it is clear players enjoy its unique identity. Behavior really struck gold with giving it a token system, as it helped to push the perk from being used only once per chase, to now having multiple uses, which can swing how long a chase lasts. Realistically, Behavior could ignore the perk and would still be doing well for itself, as Behavior have put it into a very functional and very enjoyable state. But I do believe Behavior could get away with some minor alterations. The first buff concept Behavior could go for with THWACK is actually to its token system, as I believe Behavior could get away with increasing its token count from 3 to 5, and increasing the number of tokens gained from 1 to 2. THWACK as a perk is one of the most balanced within the game I have ever seen, and because of that balance, it ends up feeling very weak to utilize, especially compared to the many other aura reading perks in the game. Additionally, because of how its particular killers shred through pallets faster than Sable players ruin matches, it makes the perk fizzle out before it can truly fetch you value when you need it most. By bumping up how many tokens you can use, along with how many you gain, it helps to resolve problem number 3, but also helps to bump THWACK up as a more appealing choice compared to other aura reading perks in the game. Behavior could also just refresh the tokens upon hooking a player, but I have to admit I enjoyed the maintenance element of THWACK a little too much to recommend it as a change. Moving on to the second buff concept for THWACK, I decided to take a different approach and look towards making THWACK more appealing for other killers within the game. One of the biggest reasons on why THWACK does not see more play on other killers is because of the killer being locked into an animation, so what better way to resolve that issue than by speeding it up. Upon kicking a pallet or breakable wall, in addition to its information effect from consuming a token, the perk also grants you a 15% increase to breaking speeds. Long story short, by making your locked animation shorter, it makes the perk feel both nicer to use, but also more accessible for any killer who wants to run it. Additionally, it makes the perk feel like a proper competitive choice within the aura reading subclass, as now it's providing you stat manipulation that helps with chase, which is often when THWACK is fetching you value. I do think this buff is the most extreme, and it does not need to truly happen, but it's a fun concept regardless. Also, hey, that is my favorite number. Also, a lot of times I said the perk's name. I think I have a headache now. Let's get to final thoughts. With that, we have covered all of Skull Merchant's perks, and I have to be honest, looking over all of them reminded me so much of why I really like Tools of Torment as a concept. The art design for Skull Merchant's perks, heck even Thalita and Hinatu's perks, are some of the best I have ever seen. Additionally, these are some of the most experimental, but also some of the most unique perks I have ever seen in the game, and it's something I really miss with current chapters. This entire year of Dead by Daylight's life has just been really boring when it comes to perks for me, as Behavior have been only looking towards stat manipulations, or moving towards subclasses that are always going to see some play. The most interesting perks of the bunch is the one where a character whips a tambourine out of thin air, and even still is just a stat manipulator to skill check spawns. That being said, Tools of Torment was absolutely not perfect, but it just hurts that anytime someone brings it up, they forget about the positives and they remember it for this character. I used to main Skull Merchant, heck I made videos on her back in her 2.0 days, but after the shotgunning and the current direction of her changes, she just feels hollow to me now. I loved her because it was the first time Behavior looked towards a trap-focused character since Hag, and balanced it to not feel like a cosmetic like the other two. Sadly, her trapping days are long over, as now Behavior are looking more towards her Feather Duster anti-loop gameplay, which I am sure many Skull Merchant players enjoy, but it's not the character that I fell in love with. I don't like ending videos on sad notes, as this is not the kind of person that I am. So I will leave in the fact that Behavior are still planning on reworking her. We have no idea what Behavior are planning on doing with her just yet. But no matter what happens, I am sure that there will still be players out there who cry about her ability to 3-gen, even if Behavior make her unable to even see generators after the rework. With all that said and done, I wish you all the best of luck in your games. You will need it, especially after Vecba's release.
Another perfect day at my corporate office chain. I wonder how well our product of NFT Sable Bathwater is doing today. Hello there, my lovely secretary Sable. How much money are we making today?
I am afraid I have some bad news for you, my lovely boss Mikaela. It seems we are fully bankrupt, and the building is on fire.
That is impossible. We are giving the people what they want.
It seems they want something much more sleazy and notably more obnoxious. Also, can I get some water? It appears I am now on fire.
Fine then. It seems we will need to use our secret weapon. This will get us our money back in no time.